So, gosh, that's quite an in-your-face image, isn't it? We basically have 3 trade events in the next 8 or 9 days. It's a standard thing for Ukie to do, to connect games businesses with international games businesses overseas, so that you can learn about the market and to learn from local experts and build an export strategy to help you go global. And we picked 3 markets that we're going to run some activities on next week. The first one is tomorrow, 5:30 in the evening on Thursday, 11th of March, and that's the opportunity to find out about how to gain exposure for your games in the United States, a particular challenge at the moment, trying to get media attention, focus in the States. And we've got a combination of a data expert from Newzoo to talk about the state of the US market, and then someone from the publishing background, Skystone, and then one of the real experts in media promotion, Garma Sutra, out there to talk about different tactics. So that should be an exciting event with some really high quality speakers there. On Tuesday the 16th, an early morning start, because we have speakers from China. So it's a 9 o'clock start for us next Tuesday, and that's connecting UK businesses to learn more about the Chinese market. Again, we start with a data expert, and then some real heavyweight companies, Huawei, Leiyu and Oriental Pearl, talking about the market from their own perspective. So again, really good looking panel from Tuesday the 16th. And then on Thursday the 18th, we haven't done too much activity with the Japanese market. It's always been regarded as a tricky market to get into. We're going to try and break down some of those barriers, good information on how to access the market and promote your products there and build a community around it. So again, starting with some data, so very useful information, and then Chorus, Brown Betty and Handheld will be sharing their particular experiences of that market. So if you're looking to learn about the market, see the current trends and data, sign up for these, all or just one of the events, whatever markets are of interest. They're always free to access. They run on Zoom. There's some links there, and in the top right-hand corner, a little link that will take you to a summary of them all. Leon will circulate the slides afterwards. Have a look at it and join us for those. Right, we're going to get on with our Going Global Games panel. These are our 2 experts today. I'm going to get them to talk about themselves in a second, so I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and then go back to those individuals. Okay, so a little bit less of me talking and more of you, because I do tend to waffle on. So I'm going to hand over to you, Matt, first. Can you take us through who you are, a bit about Genba, and kick us off?
Of course, yeah. Thanks, Sam. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Murphy. I'm the CEO of Genba Digital. We're a digital distribution business. We spun out of Sony in 2015 as a startup. So we work pretty much exclusively in the games industry. We've built up a portfolio of over 70 games publishers and developers, and we help them to distribute the digital games through a network of about 150 third-party sales channels. People like Amazon, Game, Fanatical, Voidu, Booker, Chrono, GG, people like that, across 200 countries now. We've just done our 20 millionth transaction. I think it was the day before yesterday, but I don't know who it was, and I don't know what game it was, and I don't know who sold it. But so we've been doing this for a little bit of time now. Last year, the EU was our largest market when it included the UK. The majority of our businesses overseas are not in the UK. If we didn't trade internationally, we would have a much smaller business, which would be a real struggle for us, because we'd be much less successful, because volume and scale makes us much more efficient and effective. So I think like less than 10% of our sales channels, we call them e-sailers, are actually UK based. But although that's a slightly bigger percentage of our business that's represented by those guys, but with about 40 to 45% of our publishers have a UK base. So we help them to take their IP overseas. So that's effectively who we are.
Okay, marvelous, thank you. And Toby, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. So as you probably know, I'm VP of Business Development at Codemasters, and James Bond, according to your intro slide, which I mean,
do you remember that? We'll come back to that in a minute. Yeah.
So Cody's, for those that don't know, is very much focused on racing games. It's one of the oldest developers in the UK, founded in 1986. Most recently focused on console and PC gaming, although we have ventured into mobile gaming as well in recent years. Went through a bit of a journey, private company for a long time. We went through an IPO in 2018 to list on the London Stock Exchange. And just last month, we were acquired by EA in a pretty large transaction there. I personally have been at Cody's since 2008. Prior to Cody's was down with Disney at BlackRock Studio in Brighton, for those that remember that outfit. At Cody's, I was a producer for a number of years until 2014, when I switched focus to business development and essentially built the business development department at Codemasters.
I didn't know you were at BlackRock. That's interesting. So you learn something every time, and that's the whole point of these panels. Now, actually, something else you mentioned, you said you're the Vice President of Business Development. Thank you both for your introductions. Maybe you could explain to me and the audience, what does business development actually mean? How is that different from sales? And maybe what, in the context of Codemasters, what does business development actually mean?
Sure. So we see sales and business development as separate departments, and the way we kind of divide the responsibility is that our sales team is focused on the core business of shifting units of games on our core platforms, being Xbox, PlayStation, and Steam. So they'll deal with our publishing and distribution partners on that activity, deal with our pricing strategy, promotional strategy, store metadata, everything to do with shifting units on those platforms. And then business development, in our eyes, is everything outside of that. Within the games industry, there are many ways that you can be generating additional revenues and doing additional deals with partners outside of selling core units. And that can be anything from reaching new platforms, such as Stadia or Luna, entering into porting deals to bring our games to additional existing platforms like Switch and Mac and Linux, or bringing PC games to mobile. Technology partnerships with the processor companies, Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, or bundling partnerships with hardware peripheral manufacturers, in-game advertising, licensing out IP. There's a whole load of stuff that can be done to generate revenue alongside selling the units of the games. So that's pretty much BD in our eyes. And in my opinion, I might be a bit biased, but one of the great things about BD is that it's so broad. There's so much opportunity for creative business and business development. And
that's fascinating. I don't really understand all of the nuances of that, so that's really excellent. Thank you. And Matt, how about you? What's the
yeah, we're the same actually. I mean, okay. Right at the start, we treated we call it business development and commercial. Commercial looks after the sales, if you like. They were the same people. So when we were really small, we had the same functions rolled into particular individuals, but now we've got them separated out. So we've got a biz dev team that, like Toby says, looks for sort of new opportunities, whether that's more of the same or whether that's expanding sales channels. You've got lots of different new entrants coming in, or getting new publishers on board, new content verticals, new platforms, or new geographies. So biz dev really is at the sort of vanguard, going out and to some people that probably scares the living daylights out of them. So you can get people to do that for you. Or you can work with partners, or think to make that easier. And the sales bit's really about, for us, it's about the existing network. So the dots that are joined up between publishers and sales channels, it's really working those so that they're effective. They sell more units. They do really strong product promotions and product launches.
Okay, that's interesting. It's always good to know the differences there between different businesses. I guess for a smaller company, they don't always have the opportunity to have business development from the off. So that might be something we explore later on and revisit. Now, the focus of today is about going global. And as we've heard from a variety of speakers, this is all about reaching international markets. Now, the economic case for going overseas with your product and your content is clear. The UK represents about 6% of the global games market. So if you're just selling in the UK, you're not really getting out there and experiencing it and targeting that other 94% of the market. But it's easy to say it and perhaps more difficult to do it. So starting with you, Matt, where do you start? What's the sort of page one guide to selling abroad?
So, I mean, we work a lot with developers and publishers who are going into exploring sort of using third parties to sell their products outside of the normal first party stores. So it's a very common question and a sort of a concern for people that we work with, particularly the smaller startup or smaller studios and publishers. and I heard a caught bits of the speakers earlier. All that stuff's brilliant, really, really relevant. And I think I would concur with them in saying sort of page 1 is about doing your research, I think, and understanding what you want to take on. You know, our recommendation would always be, if you're new to something like this, to start with 1 or 2 trusted relationships. You know, find a familiar or trusted sales channel that you're aware of, and that can either be, you know, a direct store that you'll know, like a Humble or somebody like that, or it could be someone like a Genba who can get you access to loads of different stores. It doesn't really matter. Like, you know, it's just somebody
you put yourself on page 1.
Yeah, put ourselves on page 1. No, but in terms of going up, but I think the point, Sam, is really just to, once you've researched that, is to just go with somebody that you trust and start in a manageable small way, because you can be quite quickly be flooded and bombarded with requests and work. And if you're a small business, that can be a real debilitator for small businesses, taking on too much or not really knowing which way to prioritize and going down blind alleys and things like that. So I would say research, and then start with a small channel and demand of those channels that they tell you about their approach to things like security, how they manage fraud, how they protect your game IP, how they'll restrict sales outside of contractual regions, and how they'll manage customer services and returns and things like that, as well as how you'll sort out payments between you and them. So if they can't give you that level of confidence, I wouldn't work with them, or find somebody that does. So, you know, you have a little checklist of things that you'd want to ask.
Yeah, a master list of things you check. That's a really good idea. Toby, do you agree with that? And what else would perhaps appear on your checklist if that's the way that you do it as well?
Yeah, I'd fully agree with it. Absolutely. I mean, it can be quite daunting. You know, there's a big wide world out there. So where do you start? It's quite challenging. But as with anything, you know, any of the greatest challenges can be broken down to simple steps, really. So absolutely, my advice would be to break it down to a checklist. You know, figure out the geographical areas that hold the biggest opportunities for you and where you choose to start. Figure out the kind of entity you're looking to partner with, you know, whether you're a developer looking for a publisher or you're a publisher looking for a distributor. You know, be comfortable with who you are and who you're trying to find. And then research companies which fit that profile. So that can be starting on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great place to start. You know, once you have an idea of a short list of companies that fit your geographical region and your service provision, then have a look on LinkedIn, see if you know anybody that works there. Reach out to them for an introduction. And beyond that, attend as many industry events as possible, I'd say, especially those that have matchmaking functionality. You know, some industry events will allow you to pre-register as a developer and tick boxes that I'm looking to meet a publisher and distributor. I'm not interested in, let's say, QA service providers or art outsource providers, etc. And that can be a really, really useful way to build your network in a region that you're not that familiar with.
Yeah, Matt, you're going to come in there? That's excellent, Toby. Thank you.
No worries.
No, I wasn't. I was just going to say.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question then.
Yeah.
Really interested about this talk about virtual events, and in fact, you mentioned getting to events and meeting people and B2B things. Which events are sort of the things that always appear in your schedule every year that you look at and you go, yeah, I've got to be there? Which are the ones that really stand out to you?
So I guess it's a bit unique time right now. So 2020 was a special case, but prior to that it would be, you know, E3, GDC, Gamescom, China Joy, Develop in the UK would be key events in the calendars. And then specifically the networking events that are tied to those conferences. You know, there are a lot of side networking events that happen.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Because also, yeah, prioritizing those events is important because take a lot of commitments, and in the small business you're out of the studio or out of the office when you're there. So I know they're really fruitful and really effective. They've been brilliant for us. But you know, you do have to be aware of what you're participating in, and you got to put everything into it really to get the most out of it, I think. So yeah.
Have you enjoyed the virtual events? I mean, I've been inundated with requests to go to these far-flung countries that I've never been to before, and I've done quite a lot of them. I've been to places I've been to places I've never been before, and accessed events all across the world in the last year with varying degrees of success. How have you found the sort of virtual experience, Matt, as a way of sort of doing business development and sales?
It's funny because I think the events, I think the more intimate events work better on virtually. On a pure sort of business development front, we found that with, you know, lockdown and restrictions, people have more time for conversations. Actually, you know, we really found that particularly in the earlier stages of sort of lockdown and things, that we were able to have a lot of conversations that have been rolling on for a long time, and they would always be kicked down the road to a Gamescom or a GDC, but I will pick that up then. And actually we found that people had more time because they weren't necessarily locked in meetings or traveling, you know, and struggling to have calls. So that was really effective for us, and it continues to be. You can't really replace the face-to-face events, but some of the intimate virtual ones are really good, because you get to, you know, you got to concentrate, haven't you? You're listening in, you consume a lot of information, whereas sometimes at an event you're distracted and there's lots of things going on, and so you know, it just depends what you're looking to get out of each event. But we found some of the intimate ones really good.
Yeah, it's an interesting view. I totally agree with that. Toby, looking at we talked earlier about you know, research, finding opportunities, making connections. I would imagine, but correct me if I'm wrong, that situation changes when you get a little bit larger. Have you not got a lot of people knocking on your door, coming to ask you for connections rather than you chasing them? Am I writing that? And how do you deal with that? Yeah,
I mean, you're totally right. I think as a small business becomes a large business with an established name, as a BD guy, you'll spend less time hunting for leads and more time being responsive to approaches on LinkedIn and other platforms, and more of your time will be spent in negotiation and valuing opportunities than looking for them. So I'd say the strategy and the techniques kind of change. You know, responsive negotiation is very different to going out and looking for leads. I mean, for us, when we're approached a lot, we try to prioritize valuation as quickly as possible. You know, looking at the approaches and the opportunities that are on the table, figuring out the potential value against each of them. If the potential value isn't clear, requesting a forecast from the partner that's seeking the rights. Looking to protect some of that valuation by proposing a minimum guarantee advance, which they may pay to us in respect of the rights, etc. So the dynamic does change a little, and moves away from the lead hunting, I'd say.
Yeah, I'd second that. In the early days, you've got to do a lot of the hard work, and then it becomes, your ability to prioritize opportunities becomes more and more important, because you've got, you know, more of them coming to you, but also the potential for them to be expensive distractions. So that's a really good idea by Toby. Getting straight to sort of the potential opportunity or the commercial opportunity is a good way of filtering some of those. And you've got to do something, you know, your time is mega precious, so you've got to make sure that you're focusing on things that are best for your business. However you get to that is up to you.
So let's have a look at some of these, you know, big opportunities then. So Toby, where have you been focusing your time and effort then? We talk about, you know, evaluation and weighing things up. What markets have you focused on? How have you found them? Has there been any surprises, any nuggets we can take from your vast experience?
Yeah, so I'd say recently China's probably been a very interesting focus of ours. As I mentioned, I mean, Cody's has been going for a long time. So when I started BD in 2014, I was in a position where luckily we had a pretty good presence in Europe and the US already. China was at the time competing with the US in terms of trying to take that #1 spot as overall revenues. And now it's clearly #1. I mean, it's $40 billion last year in terms of value, the China market, versus the US being 36 billion. So we chose to prioritize China as an area for strategic growth for us. Our games were kind of known in China, but we'd never had an official presence there or been represented by a publisher there. And with regard to how we approached the market, I think one thing that really helped us was taking part in the trade missions to China, which Ukie organized with DIT, the government guys. Yeah, those trade missions are just so valuable, because for a market that's as foreign as China is, it can be really hard to reach out and get those introductions. I mean, the social platforms aren't the same. You can't just tap people up on LinkedIn necessarily. And then when you do get the meetings, you know, there can be some language barriers, there can be some cultural differences, etc. Great thing about the trade missions is that the DIT team on the ground over there, assisted by Ukie, kind of look for contacts that would be good for you, arrange the meetings, provide a translator. So you just literally turn up and get delivered with a conveyor belt of relevant companies. And what more could you ask for building a contact base? So we went through that process. We established some good, strong partnerships in the region. Then, of course, moved on to some return visits to directly visit partners and maintain the relationships and close deals down over there. With regard to surprises and any unforeseen challenges, I'd say no massive surprises as long as you go into it with your eyes open. The market is very different. You know, the platform split is totally different. It's very much mobile. Console barely exists. The player behaviors and spending habits are very different. They're all about free to play rather than premium. Even the style and presentation of the games are very different. So you need to understand that stuff. But beyond that, I noticed that earlier on, Menzies were talking about tax. I mean, there are some unique things to think about there. You know, as a UK business, you'll pay corporation tax on your profits. Whereas when you do deal with Chinese companies, you need to prepare for the fact that a certain amount of withholding tax will be deducted as the payment comes out of China. So you will receive less money than you think you're initially going to receive. Then you need to plan for that. Because if you're a small business, that kind of cash flow effect could become a small issue for you.
That's interesting. You talked about the sort of, we started off talking about doing your research and right, there are no surprises in the market. If you've done your research and you've talked to companies and you've really prepared, that makes perfect sense. And that's where your little jokey nickname James Bond came from. Of course, when we were there together in China, they kept calling you James Bond. They absolutely loved you. I mean, I don't know why. Toby, let's move on from that.
There are a lot worse nicknames to be given, Toby.
That's true. That's true. Well, I called you the karaoke king, Matt. You went to China. You were on the stage all the time. I
wouldn't know what you were talking about. I've no idea.
Yeah. Do you remember now? I mean, I remember Jo Twist was there, our CEO. She was leading that mission. She tells me she's an absolute legend at karaoke. Can you verify that, or can you?
Yeah, she is actually. I think I might have even done a duet with her at some point, but I can't confirm or deny that. But there's a rumor about it for sure. No.
So in terms of China, you went there. How did you find that? What were you going to achieve?
Yeah, that was really good. We had a slightly different perspective. So it was a bit of a reconnaissance trip for us, and it's a really good way of doing that, and it's a great way to meet other UK businesses that are in similar situations and learn from them. You know, I went in 2018, and Toby and I met at the airport actually, and it was a really good trip because it helped us to understand what China meant for our business and when we would do something about it. So our response wasn't to instantly go full throttle into China. Actually, it was because there were some restrictions around what content we could take there, that we would only learn by being there. And so it was a really important project for us in a sense, a really cost-effective one because of the Ukie trade mission, where we could understand the dynamics of the market, get some support in terms of understanding the cultural and local requirements, realize that you don't ever write on people's business cards. That was one of the faux pas I think I made early on. And but it was really important for us to go, okay, actually we sort of deprioritized China a little bit because we understood it, and it went further along in our roadmap of where we were going to focus. It's not to say it's not important. It's just there are certain factors that we were like, okay, you know, there are things like DRM fee requirements that are a struggle for us to secure with publishers, withholding tax, although we get round withholding tax in a number of other countries. That's another thing. When you layer on the challenges for our business, combined with the fact that there isn't lots and lots of registered content there, then it just meant that it went a bit down our priority list. But that's an important thing. You know, if you're a small to medium-sized business, you need to know where all your priorities fit. Otherwise, you go full throttle into everything and you'll burn out, and that usually means burning money and time and opportunity cost.
So if we look at markets, then where is the Genba sweet spot? Where have you found that?
So
what work for you?
our strength is probably like EU, the US, so North America, but also Russia. So we built a reputation quite early on with Russia because we're a technology business. So everything we do, we wrap all the IP in the technology, the assets that we distribute, you know, keyless or key delivery models. And all of our technology sort of underpins the service. So we were seen as like a solid way to manage emerging markets like Russia, because we were good at getting the money out of Russia. We were good at secure and transparent distribution into other countries that maybe people thought, well, that's maybe not an area we want to try and do directly. So we built up that reputation, and, you know, for loads of AAA publishers now, all the way through to indie devs, will handle that as a territory. And we've done similar things in India and now sort of Southeast Asia. So, yeah, and we can try and build a model to overcome some of the things that I heard earlier on about withholding tax. Toby alluded to withholding tax. We can get around those issues or tackle those issues once for you, for the territory, for the publisher, for the territory. So, you know, because we have a single contract and we'll handle those kinds of challenges as well. So that's helped us to focus on areas, and the core areas are still like the EU because of time proximity. It's really easy to service those countries. North America because of language and things like that. So, you know, that's sort of where we focused.
I was going to ask you about some of the things that you might do differently, but we're going to skip that negative tone. We're going to end on hopefully a nice positive note here. You know, let's think about our audience here, small and medium-sized businesses. So, Toby, to you first. Sort of top tips for companies looking to look at business development and establish new partnerships. What kind of pearls of wisdom can you share with us there? Top tips for our audience.
Sure. So I guess I'd say, regardless of how small you are as an entity, you know, have confidence that the rights that you're holding have value, you know, and the partners that are having conversations with you agree with that. You know, they clearly have an interest, otherwise they wouldn't be having the conversation. Beyond that, I'd say, and then building on that same tone, I'd say, build your own understanding before necessarily having important meetings about exactly what it is that you feel your partner wants and needs out of the relationship, and equally what you want and need out of the relationship, and be totally open about that and upfront about it when you enter into the discussions with a partner. You know, it might be that you hold rights which they want the distribution rights to, or a license to those distribution rights, and what you feel that you need is confidence that you're going with the right partner. Therefore, perhaps you feel that you would want some kind of minimum guarantee advance on revenues up front, specifically, or especially if it's an exclusive agreement, because there's a lot of commitment there. If minimum guarantee on revenues isn't on the table, perhaps you'd feel comfortable if there was a certain marketing commitment in the contract. You know, if your publisher agrees to a minimum marketing spend, so that you can be confident that they're giving your game mind share, etc. So, I mean, that would be my top tip, really. Think about it in advance, set your own boundaries as to what's acceptable to you and what's not acceptable, and be totally upfront with people when you enter into conversations with them, because it will save a lot of time and effort and probably bring the best result in the long run.
Amazing, thank you. And Matt, top tips from you to end this today?
I'd echo everything Toby said. I think his suggestion about getting to sort of your commercial expectations early on is a really good idea. My main one would be to prioritize. You know, we went from sort of managing cash flow on a weekly basis in the very early days. Those days are long gone, you know, and we're investing all of our profits and things like that into growing our business. But prioritization is as important now as it was back then, where, you know, we were worried about doing the wrong things. So I would say it doesn't matter what size your business is. Think about what's most important to you. Focus on the specific channels that you want to start with. Do a bit of research on those channels, and as Toby says, set out what you want from them, both from a commercial point of view, but also from a sort of security and contractual point of view, because it's your IP. So, you know, if you're going to be handing that over to somebody it could well be your baby. You may well have developed that yourself or being the driving force behind it. So it's really important to you, and your partner should respect that, and treat it with that kind of respect. And so when you ask difficult questions, they should be comfortable answering them.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. And I guess one final tip to add to that, which is actually really interesting, is become familiar with IP. You know, everything that we do in the games industry, all business that we do in the games industry is IP based. And, you know, what is IP? It's trademarks and copyrights are really the forms of IP which apply to us. So if you're not sure how to register a copyright or a trademark, you know, I mean, copyrights are an automatic grant, that's great. Just do some reading about what copyrights are, what trademarks are, how you can register them, which are automatic, what protections give you, and then you'll be more familiar with what the item is that you're trading ultimately, which will give you a lot more confidence in discussions and negotiations.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for that conclusion to our panel here. Short and sweet today. The event itself has gone on for a nice length of time. There's some good quality there. So we'll make sure that all of the talks are available for people afterwards, rerun the videos, have a go through them. But Toby and Matthew at this point, or Matt, thank you very much for joining the panel.
Very welcome.
Those questions.
Thanks,
for everyone on the call, thanks for joining us here today for our partners, AWS, Menzies and Barclays. We're heading off now to Gathertown. There's a note in the chat so that you can have a look at that and sign up. That's a chance to come and meet some of our speakers and find out a little bit more information and meet some people you haven't met before, so some serendipitous conversations. But for now, thank you very much, and don't forget to look out for those other trade events we've got coming up tomorrow and next week, and the Hub Crawl will continue next week on our Business of Gaming talks. Thanks very much.